career. What? Like there was comments along the way. There were things that, I was one of 3 females at most of the conferences when I was in sales. That was fairly intimidating. You got to understand what your boundaries were.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train 1 or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Folks, we're back for another show of Simply Trade. We are so thankful for our listeners. And again, we appreciate your listenership, if you will. You're liking us. We're trending up, and it's just, we're very humble. And we're looking forward to, Lalo and I are going to be in Oklahoma City coming up here at the end of the month, where we're going to get to be at the GTech conference. So excited about that. And hopefully you'll come by and shake our hands and get to talk to us a little bit. So, Lalo, how are you doing, my friend? How's life treating you on this day?
Doing good. Yeah. And then a little bit on that GTech, it'll be about 2 or 3 days after we air this show. So hopefully if any of you are listening to this and you're going to attend GTech, come up to us. We're going to have a space there in the corner. We're going to have microphones and the whole works. Anyway, just come up to us and we'll get you on the show. I mean, even if it's 5 minutes, just to tell us what you think of the conference so far, et cetera. So, we would love for you all to come by. The folks over at GTech are really excited about having us there. So, but yeah, everything's really good. So we may meet some new people there, which kind of brings up the topic of today, not topic, but the guest for this week. Andy, I never met this person. It's really cool to get to see her. And so anyway, I'm looking forward to this recording.
Yeah. And you also have me on the podcast today, which is very, very not original, because usually I'm just on the news podcasts because I don't know much about trade. I don't know much about trade, but now I do. They fill me in and whatnot. But we have someone on the show today, which I'm super excited about. I reached out to her. I saw her LinkedIn profile. I was super impressed. Listened to her podcast. Her name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. That's, if I'm saying this right. Hi, Sarah. I'm so excited to have you on because I feel like, women, I love to have a woman on, first of all. And then she seems, I listened to your podcast and you seem very open. You seem very, you talk deeper than just trade, which is kind of what I like. And so you have done lots. I can't even mention, you kind of worked in logistics, I think on the marketing side, which I'm doing. Yay. And the board member of Forum for International Trade Training. And you're a founder of Blended, which I've listened to a podcast, really good, talks about inclusion, diversity, in the workspace, which we can also talk about in trade. And then also the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, which really intrigued us, obviously, because we also talk about trade. And I want to welcome you. So thank you for jumping on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you and love that you're talking all about trade. The Forum for International Trade Training, I'm on the board and we do all sorts of training, obviously, in international trade. I have my designation and so I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's fantastic. I'll say it. Oh, go ahead, Lalo. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's funny listening to you in real time because I don't know if you're a podcast listener like me that listens to 1.5 speed. So
I can't do that. That's so you told me that before because I asked you, how do you go through podcasts so fast? And he says, you don't listen to them on 1.5 speed? I'm like, no, I can't catch up.
I do 1.2. I can't do 1.5. That's way too fast for me.
Oh, yeah.
Well, folks usually have to do 1.5 just to get me to normal speed because I'm down here in the South and we talk a little bit slower and we're slow on the uptick. So,
yeah, they need to slow me down because I'm too fast. So I can't imagine listening to me on 1.5. You can't even understand me.
Sarah, I got to tell you, Annik has a fan base. We have been publishing now for a little less than a year, but it's like as it's come out, it has been absolutely fantastic because we love this Gen Z. What are you? You're Gen Z, is that right? I always get it screwed up.
Yeah,
And
Gen Z.
and I love when she challenges us with some questions and whatnot at times. It's always been one of those was like, well, have you thought about this way or that way? And so we have a great discussion. And
Well, I think that's why I liked Sarah's podcast, because I haven't heard someone do the same thing, but in a different way. Because Sarah, you talk about different things on your podcast. I feel like that's kind of, we have a separation in our podcast, even though it is trade. But I mean, some things are similar, but they're also all different people. So some might think, well, are you guys competitors? No, we're not really competitors, because it's just different. I did listen to it. I was like, I'm like, can we no, it's very different. But I think coming together is even better, because you can kind of, talk about all the things you hear and kind of get together, which we always talk about that. We think that trade is kind of a team effort, and getting to speak to someone that speaks to so many people in supply chain kind of makes things better. And now we're getting this out to even more people, which is like, should charge for this. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Attention all trade geeks. The G-Tech conference is coming to Oklahoma City and you won't want to miss it. Mark your calendars for July 30th through August 1st and join us for a jam-packed event with expert-less sessions and networking opportunities. And guess what? The Simply Trade podcast will be recording live at the event. Don't miss this unique chance to be featured on a show and share your insights with fellow trade professionals. We'll see you in Oklahoma City, where trade compliance takes center stage. Go to www.ncbfaa.org and become part of the action.
Hey, listen, let me jump in here. I want to start off with something here is that, as I said before we started recording, Sarah, I am really intrigued by your background and some of your experiences. And I have a question for you here is that first, the statement of there's no doubt we all enjoy our successes and you enjoy the win, if you will, but we learn more from our failures. And you've obviously through your background and all that, you've seen the highs and lows of supply chain and different things. And it's been, listen, supply chain itself, the trucking industry, the 3PL, 4PL scenarios, carriers, all that kind of stuff has been kind of a rough way to go. What has been your takeaway for, looks like maybe your top three things or something, your takeaway when you have gone up, you've hit bottom, and you've come back? What's been your takeaway on that?
Wow, that's such a good question. And I have seen a lot of really high highs and a lot of really low lows. I think it's really just about putting one step in front of the other when you are in those really low lows. I was very lucky to already have a podcast that was popular and I liked doing it. So it was something that I just focused on when I had nothing else. I learned social media, website design, graphic design, although I wasn't very good at any of those. But I mean, social media, not so bad, but graphic design, not so much. But I had something to focus on, right? And I decided from the beginning that I was going to be me. I wasn't going to try to pretend to be anything that I wasn't, and people were either going to like it or they weren't going to like it. And so that's kind of a big takeaway for me, is that to have something to focus on that you get up every day to do. You don't necessarily know where it's going to go. You don't need to have all the answers. Just do it, right? Progress over perfection.
And I kind of want to elaborate on that. I love that question, by the way, because, I'm still working myself up and, I'm also in trade, but I want to kind of spin this to trade and see how did that influence you in trade? Because I know as a woman, I don't want to say logistics and trade seems like a man job, but
it's male dominated. It's just traditional. It's that I was going to go that way, but it's like it is what it is, Annik. So,
or I feel that way. I don't want it. I mean, it's not that way. I don't think that way, but you think that way sometimes. So I'm just wondering how being a woman in trade, and working yourself up, you talk to a lot of people in trade. How do you manage that, or how do they respond to you?
Yeah, so I grew up in the industry. So I feel like I've been in the industry since I was like 9 years old. So we're almost 30 something years in the industry because my dad owned the company that I went to work for. Right? So it was a family business. We talked about this at the dinner table. So to be honest with you, going into the industry didn't really feel like that. Although there was comments, throughout my career, oh, you'll have babies and you won't worry about a career. What? Um, like there was comments along the way. There were things that, I was one of 3 females at most of the conferences when I was in sales. That was fairly intimidating. You got to understand what your boundaries were. What was I going to do? What was I not going to do? I was never going to be on the golf course. I'm a baseball player, but golfing is not my jam. So how was I going to get those deals done in a different way? How was I going to get them to respect me in a different way? And I used my knowledge. I tried so many different things. I took so many courses while I was working, not necessarily to get a master's. I tried all sorts of different courses so that I could better understand it from different perspectives. And I could better understand supply chain in a variety of different ways. And so, I think it's just about trying different things. I mean, I have a Woman in Supply Chain series on the blog and on the podcast. And your question is a little bit loaded because it's different for different people. Some people that I've interviewed haven't experienced anything that made them feel anything less or anything different.
I
Right.
haven't either. I know.
But some people have, and they have
Yeah.
stories and they have things that they can share. And so both sides of those coins are very, very important. Right? Because we don't know what we don't know. And that's one of the reasons why I started Blended as well, is that we need to hear about scenarios from different perspectives and how people feel coming out of those conversations. Because as the person that you're talking to, you might not think that there's anything wrong. But then the person leaving may have gotten offended because there was something that was said that really wasn't okay.
well, to that point, I will say this. I mean, whether we like it or not, in today's world, there seems to be this trying to make everything politically correct and merge it over, and everything's the same, and it's not. There are definitive differences between male and female. There are the cultural differences, and then there's personality differences. And one of the things that I will say that seems to be the most effective have been with my own staff at times. I've used some personality assessment programs. Personally, I love DISC. If you've never used that, DISC, for those out there. And there's another one called The Two Sides of Love with John Trent. Gary Smalley wrote that one, and it uses animals instead of 4 category names. But the point being is it improved communication. Here's the key thing that I just picked up on what you were saying, Sarah, is that there are differences, there are things, and you have an intent of trying to deliver a message. You have people in the meeting, one walks away and think, hey, that was great, and the other one's offended. And based on some of that and some of the questions and all that, there are a lot of people that will be, they'll start asking questions to a challenge or an objective that you've thrown out there. And a person in management may take it as a threat to their authority. There's somebody's challenging my authority. It's like, no. And I personally can say this because I did this. I wound up, after going through DISC, I wound up going, oh, here's where we want to go. This is what we're going to do. And I started getting questions like, okay, what's the forms we're going to use? What's the time perimeter? What's the deadlines and all that? And I'm going, I just gave you this. Good night. Are you kidding me? And they're needing, what are the rules what I learned from that. What are the rules of the working with? The other one was, why are we doing this? And we've always done it this way. And well, what I discovered, those people are needing time to digest change. So the point is, they need is, all right, it's a little different. Well, I could walk out of there thinking, well, they're just full of beans, or they're like, hey, these folks really needed to know something. I guess I get it into, like, even men and women. There's a scenario there where people process information differently. So when you're looking at it, I got to compliment you on something. When I'm hearing you're taking courses, I was hearing that you were taking courses to improve maybe you want to call it a weakness or a shortfall that you saw in yourself, to try and better understand the topic at hand. You weren't taking courses on something that you were good at just to make yourself better at it. Would that be a good assessment of what you were just trying to look at there?
Yeah, it's a good assessment. I mean, I tell everybody all the time is you have to try different things to figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you actually enjoy doing, what you don't enjoy doing. And so I've taken a variety of courses, personally, professionally. Some of it is to be aware. Some of it is around communication. Some of it is self-awareness, but some of it is also industry related. And so what does somebody in sourcing actually go through? I didn't know that, being in logistics, right? What does it take to move a product into a different country? Well, there's marketing, there's legal, there's accounting, like there's so many things that go into that.
IT. Oh, you
And
got
what do we have
systems
to
like
think about?
what do you have to? Yep, compliance. That's our right. Well, to that point, all right. There has been when I was working up in Canada. By the way, I brought home a baby Canuck. My daughter was born up in Mississauga there.
Oh,
And
that's where I was born.
yeah, and Credit Valley Hospital's where she was at, and
Me too.
we were out by the Aaron Mills Town Center out there. Anyway, but I remember back in my days up there, I was with FedEx in those days, and I helped a company that was made contact lenses, and they were breaking into the Canadian market, and actually it wasn't called e-commerce back then, but it was e-commerce basically, and breaking into the Canadian market. With that, there's been a proliferation. I can't even say the right word. I'm sorry. There's been a growth. I'm dumb as a box of rocks, so bear with me, okay? There's been this growth of distribution centers, especially in the Ontario area, Mississauga and Hamilton and all that are serving the U.S. market due to taking advantage, more specifically on the e-commerce, and taking advantage of the de minimis, U.S. de minimis clearance processes and all that. With that, and as I've gone through, have you seen any trends in particular where, as far as the 3PLs that have come in of recent, and what do you think the trends are as far as career-wise for folks there in Canada, as well as what you see maybe even on the U.S. side of the board?
Yeah, so I've been on the media side for, I don't know, 5 years now. So I've kind of been out of logistics for that amount of time. But I do get this question a lot. What do we need to upskill? What do we need to look at when we're looking at a career in logistics or supply chain? I remember, working in sales and talking to companies in the US looking to come into Canada. But like you said, the de minimis is so small that it's very difficult, right? That's consolidated services. You got to figure that out.
I always say, for the Canadian citizens of it, you can thank the Retail Merchants Association, and then more specifically, the hardware store owner there in Hamilton that got it lowered. And it's finally come up a little bit more, but I'm like, good night. It's like Canadians pay a lot because of that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, we do. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think there's even more opportunity in things that we haven't even maybe thought of yet. I remember when I started the podcast in 2016, I mean, supply chain media wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a word, and I had no idea where this was going to take me and what the opportunities could be like. And so I think there is a lot of opportunity. I think, supply chain professionals need to upskill in a variety of different ways. I think we need soft skills. I think that's very important coming out of the pandemic. Communication is key. I also think that you also need to be able to communicate your transferable skills when you're going into a job opportunity or an interview, because there's a lot of transferable skills. If you have not been in supply chain, you're looking to get into supply chain, that has to be communicated so that you can get that opportunity.
And Sarah, I was going to say, Sarah, in listening to some of your shows, I guess I'm shifting gears here a little bit from skills to more listening to some of your episodes that I saw that or heard that you tend to you have a lot of tech people in your or companies in software companies on your show. We have had a few where they're talking about like AI and like blockchain, things like that as it relates to forced labor, as it relates to like classification. What have you seen are like the cool tools, I guess, let's call it, for the logistics and supply chain industry? Like have you seen or heard? And you don't need to name names, of course, but I mean, I'm just wondering what have you seen through your interviews that that might be trending and people would like on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, one of the reasons why people listen to our podcast is because we interview the companies and we do a deeper dive into who they are, what they do, how they help their customers, because there's so much choice out there, right? There's so many vendors out there. What is it not everybody is their ideal client. And not everybody has necessarily the software or the solution to that particular supply chain challenge that they might want to be solving. And so that's what we do with that podcast. And you're right, we have a lot of technology providers on there because there's a lot of really amazing technology that is out there. But how do we sift through the noise? How do we know what exactly they do and how it's going to help us? And so I would say, I like talking to all of them because it's really about the question, what makes you different? What are you going to do for me that the other person is not going to do for me? What's your founder story? Why did you even create this business? What was the problem that you had in your day-to-day life that led you to wanting to solve this problem? So as far as technology, I don't know if I really necessarily know what is trending because it also differs by organization and the challenge that they're having in that particular moment. I was having this discussion with somebody the other day about conferences. So conferences have really changed, right? We used to go to conferences and people would walk the floor and go to different booths and see who's out there. But now shippers are attending conferences because they have a particular challenge that they're trying to solve. And they're going in there to meet those particular people that can potentially solve that problem.
To give them and also to give them the feedback to say, here's my solution. What do you think? Is getting firsthand. We were at a conference back in March that there were a couple of companies in there that were they were startups. One in particular was using AI. And of course, artificial intelligence is the big buzzword right now, and they're trying to apply it, and some are loving it, some are hating it. And it's like, whatever. I think there's going to be some phenomenal, great automation applied using AI, but it can't be on its own, in my personal opinion. But it's going to enhance and the effectiveness of some of these things. But to your point, you go to conferences and they were going through and it was kind of like they were opening up the kimono and say, here's our product, and see if you can find any warts on this thing or whatever. And they literally, it was great. People were sitting down using their system, and it locked up on them a couple of times, and they went through and they could discover it. But the purpose of the conferences has been, it's like people have a very focused, hey, I want to be here, I want to network, but I've got to get an answer to a few things. Either I've got a question and who can solve it, or I've got a solution and who can validate it.
Well, and it's also because supply chain professionals, you've got limited time at the moment. There's so many things that they're juggling. There's so many things that they have to do. They have a priority list. They know what it is that they need to solve by a certain point of time. They know how many IT resources they actually have to be able to help them with those projects. And so it's very different. And like you said, I think AI obviously is trending. I think everybody's trying to utilize that, but we're still talking about data. We're still talking about what's the right data, what's the wrong data, what are the processes that we're trying to solve for.
Have you ever gone out, or do you ever go out and hit some of the conferences and do the public appearances?
Yes. I think I'm
like?
traveling every week from September to November.
Uh-oh, look out.
Well, I was going to say, we are huge advocates for conferences. I went to my first compliance. It's not, is it compliant? No, it's like logistic. It's a compliance. Well, it's ICPA. We go there a lot, and we actually we had an interview just last week with Liz, right? She's great. Anyways, that was my first conference, and it was so much fun. And I realized, because I was a little scared because I don't know anything about trade. And so I got to talk to loads of people and learning everything about trade. And that was the first time I wasn't intimidated of logistics or trade or compliance or anything like that, because people are so nice and they wanted to help me and they wanted to explain, and I asked questions. Though I have to say I have a different personality. If you're very, shy and you're not going to get anything out of it. You kind of have to break your shell, because no one will come up to you and say, hey, I'm going to tell you all about logistics or trade or compliance. So anyways, I think communication and just being a little bit open, I know that's hard for some people because we're not all the same people, right? But if you do that, you'll get so much out of it, even if you're a first timer or whatnot. So I wanted to touch on communication, because I know you communicate with a lot of people, supply chain people, and you communicate to a lot of supply chain people. So I wanted to see, like, what kind of audience are you reaching through your podcast? Are they really supply chain people, or are they also people like me who, are barely in logistics or compliance, but kind of on the backside, but learning more, which is very good for me because I kind of learn what's behind the scenes and I can market better of what I know, right? So kind of have to understand it. And I always said to Lalo and Andy, I want people to listen to our podcast that are not in trade, because I think trade is such a universal thing. It's not just, how are you getting your package at the door? It doesn't just appear. It's, it gets here from across, the sea or whatever. So I'm just wondering, like, who are you talking to and what kind of questions have you gotten? Have you gotten very supply chain questions? Or I know I hit you with so many questions at one time. It's a very bad skill of mine. But you know what I mean?
Let her answer.
You know what I mean? So, what kind of questions do you get? Is it more supply chain? Is it people just genuinely asking? Or, Yeah, it depends on what I'm doing. So I have a weekly live show called Thoughts and Coffee, and I get people from all over tuning into Thoughts and Coffee. I had a lady comment on YouTube, I think a couple of months ago, and she was like, I'm tuning in because I'm having trouble receiving my package and I just want to know what's going on, which was totally cool. I love that. And then because we talk about diversity and inclusion, we get people, and Blended isn't just supply chain people. Right? We're getting people from all different industries. So now we're getting people from all different industries listening to Blended, which is correlated to Let's Talk Supply Chain. But for the most part, we do talk to supply chain professionals. When I'm at conferences, I'm usually the one asking questions because I'm either moderating a panel or I'm doing video interviews on site. And I'm asking the questions about, what's trending in the industry? What are you thinking about right now? What keeps you up at night? So those are some of the questions that I'm asking to the folks that I'm talking to. I don't get a lot of opportunity to be on the other side of the mic, which I am today. I've actually had 2 opportunities this week, which has been a lot of fun. And so when you talk about questions, I get a lot of questions about my journey, what that's looked like, how I've created the podcast, what it looks like to be in supply chain media, that kind of thing.
The one thing that I have noticed in supply chain is there are some that are, they're with a company and they're there for many, many, many years. But in general, there's a lot, especially when it comes to international and the customs import and export side of things. It seems to be, about within 5 years, there's some kind of a turnover. People are going to different companies, they're getting promoted. And so what I always find is that you go to these conferences as well as other things, and you build a network because you come across a problem. It's what I call bird dogging. I got a problem. I don't know who knows the answer, but I can call, let me call Sarah and it's like, hey, Sarah, here's what my guy, and well, I don't have it, but I know somebody that does, and get you closer to it, right?
Yeah. And well, that brings it to a good point too, as well, like talking about integrity and doing the things that you say that you're going to do, because that's a really important part of building that network and building that trust, building the credibility. We're just about to launch a membership group, and one of the groups has exclusive content. We've got Best Buy, Macy's, some of the high level executives from some of the big retailers. And that came from the hard work that we've done in the last 5 years to gain that credibility that they trust us to be able to come on and speak their truth when it comes to their supply chain challenges and solutions.
Right. And I was gonna talk about that, your secret society. I like that. I like that you're I hate the word pivot because I know you're not pivoting. You're growing into that. You're evolving into that. And honestly, that's where we're heading to. The core of our company is doing training as well. So that's the core. And then that training company puts together the podcast. But that's exactly what we're doing. We're building a community that, with all these years of trust. We've had a little bit of an advantage because we've been around since 1991, so it's been quite a while. But now that we're doing podcasts and everything, more and more people are finding out. So now we can build that community because now people are saying, "Well, how can we talk to you?" So, but yeah, and I like that. And it's funny because Andy and I started this kind of like, what do we do during the pandemic? Kind of like not bored, but how do we stay in touch with people? Because we're not seeing people in the conferences, and so we evolved it to this. And so we never thought it was going to be this big and how much people really like it. And in fact, I see people liking your posts or your announcements and all that are also in our network. But anyway, that's what I mean by community. I just feel like we need to build that community. And I like that you did that. You grew, or not grew, but started that secret society. It's so cool the way you named it too.
That's really funny. We've been, I think on LinkedIn, somebody said, is this like the Illuminati?
Well,
or the skull and bones, all those.
Your point though is on credibility. When you're in the industry and you have been out there for a while and all that, then you come across and people, know you or maybe know of you. They either like, this is somebody that has enough integrity. If they say it's going to rain, you can set your tubs out, it's going to rain. Or if it's somebody else, it's like, that person's all hat and no cattle. So it's like, one of the things we get through and start looking at it is like, yeah, you know what you're doing. And it is such a pleasure to work with, and people will support you if they respect you.
Have you gotten any backlash from like either of your shows? Like, do you have like, I know the trade community is very friendly. I feel like you wouldn't get any backlash, but have you gotten any backlash?
Yeah, I've had some negative comments on LinkedIn. I think we did a poll. We did a poll a couple of months ago, and we used the hashtag woman in supply chain. And somebody commented, they were like, this has nothing to do with woman in supply chain. I don't even know why you're using that hashtag. And we looked at it and we were like, okay, you know what? That's a really good point. So we tried to turn the negative into a positive. I do get some questions around blended because they are. Yeah, they are such difficult topics. I've been very lucky, knock on wood, so far that we haven't had any negative comments. But what I do get is, I can't believe that you're actually doing this, because of the negativity that could come with some of the comments or some of the conversations that we're having. I might be a little bit biased, but magic happens on every single episode of Blended. When you bring 5 people from different walks of life together, and I mean, it's such a humbling experience for me because some of them don't even know me. They don't know the other people. They've never met them before. And we engage in a 2-hour or an hour and a half conversation about very, very deep, personal, hard, heavy topics. Like, we did one on ageism, and we had a woman of color in her 40s from the UK. And we had a Caucasian gentleman in his 60s. I mean, we had other people on the show too. And they had some very respectful conversation and disagreement throughout the show. And when I hit the stop record button, she turned to him and said, "Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective." And I was like, this is why we do it, people.
Too bad that wasn't on the recording.
Yeah,
Okay. You gotta have the moments
say,
within the recording and then the moments outside of the recording too.
That's amazing. I was gonna say, I listen to so many podcasts. I mean, I think my generation is just like a podcast generation. Like, we love podcasts. I have so many that I listen to, I can't even keep up. And that's something I love to listen to. Like, something that, you kind of get motivated, and you go through life and you're like, oh yeah, you would maybe act different in a situation, but you listen to that one podcast and you're like, oh no, I heard this before. I should maybe act a little, just be a little more careful, or I don't know, something that you've learned. And that's why I kind of love those podcasts. And I thought it was great that you use your platform. I mean, you kind of share both podcasts on your platform because it's kind of one, right? But I love that it's together in logistics, because I think in logistics, it's important for people to kind of be, it's not a soft industry. It's like a very hot, I feel like it's not very, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we need to talk about these things in the industry. I'll give you an example.
Exactly.
I'll give you an example. I'm at a conference, an older Caucasian male comes up to me and says that they just want to meet me, and then goes, "I'm just so very proud of you." That is the best of intentions. But at the same time, it's very condescending. Like, I didn't think that you could do it, but I'm very proud that you have done that. And I'm not saying that I took it in a wrong way. What I'm saying is that this is a very good example of how somebody thinks that they have come with good intentions, but how it can be perceived, and not knowing what you don't know. I didn't think anything different of him. And I knew that it came from a very good place. But unless we have these conversations and we point out in a group scenario how people feel in different scenarios, we're never going to change and make that impact.
And how I know you have the women's in supply chain. What have you kind of seen? What are the trends? Like, what do they talk about? Do you see more positives than negatives, or what's kind of the trend going up?
Yeah. No, I see lots of positive. Basically, we focus on their journeys. Like, I started the Woman in Supply Chain series because I just wanted to hear what other women in the industry went through in their journeys to get to where they are today. It wasn't about necessarily female empowerment. It was just, I just wanted to hear about their stories. And if I wanted to hear about their stories, I'm sure other people would. And it's been amazing because I get a lot of great feedback from women in the industry saying, your series is one of the reasons why I stayed in this industry. Or your series is one of the reasons why I actually decided to take the leap to come into supply chain. And it's because of feedback like that just makes it all worthwhile, right?
That's amazing. Those are great feedbacks.
Yeah.
I hope that I don't know, do you know who Lisa Lisson is at FedEx Canada? She is the president of FedEx Canada now. And I would highly suggest for especially your women in trade, she is a phenomenal leader. She's when I was at FedEx up there in Canada at the time, she was my financial analyst. And so she worked up through, and she was a good hard worker and whatnot. And she's now president of FedEx Canada. Great leader. And there's some phenomenal women at FedEx in leadership there. But your women in trade, that would be a good one. Curious.
We just started a collaboration with Supply and Demand Chain, who have a Woman in Supply Chain award. And so we're actually going to be featuring the award nominees in our series moving forward.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Oh, that's a great subject for great topic there on that one for those shows. That'd be great.
And we probably need to connect you with, do you know Kelly Kemmock? She has her own podcast. It's called Women in Trade. That's what it's called. And so we probably need to connect. She is such an advocate. She's awesome. But that's what she does too. She says that's what keeps her going is hearing those stories about ladies or women who come up to her and say, this is a great podcast. And she's also a big advocate for mentoring and being able to, lead people.
And I know not a lot of young people listen to the podcast because trade just, as a Gen Zer, I'm going to speak for them real quick. They do not care about trade.
Well, it's like, let's watch paint dry on the wall. It's like,
but we do
great.
care,
Yeah.
But we do care about empowerment, and we care about our journeys and where to go. And I think those are the things we like to hear. And those are the things that's going to keep going, like people, my age or even younger that are getting out of college, hearing those stories. What if someone is very interested in trade, supply chain, but just so intimidated? I think if they hear those kind of things, that's just gonna, and it's great because I love that we have all these kind of things in the world. It makes it such a better place.
Listen, we can keep going. I think we're going to need to wrap some things up, but I've got a question for you, and maybe a little lighthearted here. Can you remember this happened to Lalo and I? We've known that this G-Tech will be our fourth public appearance, and it's been really interesting. The more we've done, every time it's like people will recognize us and all that, and it was really surreal when the first time was somebody was like, "Oh, hey, I know these guys." We were down in Dallas at a conference, and they saw our backdrop, and they said, "Oh." And I was standing behind them, and they said, "Oh, I listen to these guys. I like the show." It was like, and I honestly was looking at it like, "Well, great." And we were talking about it, like, I wonder how we can improve the show. And I asked the question. I said, "Well, how do you like the show?" I said, "Do you like it? And is there anything we can do to improve it?" And they flipped around, going, "The voice, that's you." And I'm like, it was, it shocked me. What was it like the first time you went out and somebody recognized you on that at one of the conferences?
I think the best time, so I was at IANA last year, and I think they were students. I don't know where they were students of. I can't remember which institution, but they came up and asked me for a selfie.
There you go.
And told me how much that selfie meant to them. And so that was when I knew I made it.
I'm always scared that people are going to recognize how dumb I am and what I don't know. And then Lalo's the one that's carrying the load here. So it's
right.
Now we've got Annik that just saves the day on our weekly roundup. So
I would hope that we maybe see you at a conference maybe someday.
Yeah, we're going to try to go to supply chain conferences as a company, so I mean, maybe not as a podcast, but as a company. So we might want to find out just to meet you, Sarah, because it would be really fun to meet you in person.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll have to come all the way from Germany, but I'll be there.
Sarah, we greatly appreciate you coming on our show. What a great honor it's been. And it's like definitely all three of us are sitting there just, giddy as a filly on a spring morning. So this has been wonderful. So I really appreciate you coming on board and spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that you reached out and for the opportunity. It's just been a great conversation and getting to know you all.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'll keep in touch definitely if I have any questions. I think you're probably a great person to ask when it comes to women's in trade.
All right. So for our listeners, we're going to be having links in our show notes and whatnot, so you can definitely check out Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. She is a phenomenal lady. She's got her own series of shows that I'm telling you what, you're going to learn something. And as I'm saying, find that nugget of knowledge or that action you need to take to better yourself. Folks, we love you. We appreciate you. And have a great day.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.